theory in a nutshell, transposition at the octave. What's an octave? Well, it's, for example, here's a G. The next possible G you can play is an octave above. The next possible G below would be an octave below. Okay, so an octave is the next possible G or whatever note above or below. Now I find with my students, transposing at the octave within the staff, within the same staff, seems to be easier than going between like bass, treble and bass clef. So what I did here was write a little key on the side. You don't have to do that, but it's just a thought. I put the 3 G's because there's our first note G. So that way you can do it at the side or over on the side in your own little staff or something if there's no room for it. So then I can see, oh well, the next G would be right up here. If I'm asked to go an octave above. If I'm asked to go an octave below, I get into ledger lines down here in the treble clef when I'm going below. So you can use a little key if you want to, or you can count. And I strongly urge you to count letter names. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right, or backwards. You know, if it's kind of separated like this, you can think, oh, well, here's the G, and you're going to count down until you get to the next G. Okay, so this is one way to do it. Give yourself a little key. The next way would be without that, you just count, right? So here's bass clef. If you don't want to, bother making yourself a little key, that's fine. Again, I'm going up in the bass clef, for example, here. So that's a C. Now, the next possible C above that would be middle C right here. And I would color it in, and I'd put the stem down. Now be careful because sometimes your stems change. Remember that middle line can go either up or down. Above it, the stems will go down. Below it, the stems will go up. So I've seen mistakes where somebody will put the same stem, even though it should be going the other way. They're just following exactly what's here. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure your stems are going the right direction. Okay? So again, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now when you get into the ledger line, you should write that ledger line in when you get there. I'll explain more when we get down here because there's more ledger lines. So here's a C, right? You can write it in carefully, quietly, lightly if you want to. You're going to go backwards, C, B, A, G, F. Now you're going to get to the E. Make that ledger line. Write it in E, D. That's a very crooked ledger line. E, D, C. And then you would just erase this little starting C if you needed to do that, okay? Or you could just do it here and figure it out, write it down here, and then transpose it down here. Whichever way you want to do it. Then the stem would go up and you would color it in. Make sure it's the same type of note. Now, the reason I tell you to put this line in and then that line is because I've seen people go, and then I'll see the homework like this. And they go, oh yeah, I just forgot to write that line in. Well, that's not a C. That's an E. It's just kind of down too far. Right? If you were doing an exam, they wouldn't say, oh, maybe this person was thinking it's really a C. I'll just pretend there's a line there. No, you have to put that line in there. It has to be there, okay? So be careful about your ledger lines, be careful about your stems, and about coloring in your notes to the right value or not coloring them in, depending on what kind of note it is. Now, we get to going between the clefs. Okay, when transposing between treble and bass clef, it's very helpful to use a grand staff. Now, for example, piano, a pianist would read on the grand staff. The right hand generally plays in the treble clef and the left in the bass clef. And it's separated because if all those lines were put together, our brains, it would be too hard to figure out where everything is. They separate it because it's easier for our brains to see how that works. And there's a one imaginary line here. Again, a wiggly line. It's right, I'm showing you here better. Middle C, that's middle C, an imaginary line between the bass clef and the treble clef. Now, it's separated by more space than the other lines. Be careful about that. Because, like, how can only one note fit in there? Well, only one note does. So, if you were writing a middle C in the treble clef, you kind of keep the same distance. You try and keep the same distance into the next ledger line. There's your C. If you write it in the bass clef, it's there. But those are the same note. Those are both middle C. When you look at them on the grand staff, it looks a little funny because they're far apart from each other. But it's that space there. Okay, so remember where middle C is, that you have an imaginary line in between there. So that will help us when we go between clefs. Now here's a little question. Say the question says, transpose this little melody down an octave into the bass clef. We're going to use a grand staff because it's more helpful. Because what people tend to do is they try and do it in their heads and think, well, there's an F. So the next possible F would be right here. Well, no, that is an F, yeah. But that's 2 octaves below because there's an F right here. Right, because this makes it look kind of like it's close, so that must be the answer, but no, it's not going to look close, okay? not when you're going between clefs. You can count if you're careful. If the treble clef's on the bottom, the bass clef's treble clef's on the top and the bass clef's on the bottom, you can try going, you know, F, E, D, middle C, B, A, G, F to there. Some people have a lot of success with that. Or you go to your grand staff because it's all more connected, right? So again, you would count F, E, D, middle C, B, A, and then G, F. So you would find the F right there. Use your grand staff. It's very helpful. Print one out. Write one out. Make one out for yourself. Whatever you want to do. Ask your teacher for one. Grand staffs are very helpful when you're working at the octave between the two clefs. I find students who don't use it have a lot more trouble, right? Because it's a nice visual aid. So this F is here. We figured out here. We also counted down. It's going to be here. Again, I'm going to color it in. I'm going to change the stem because this stem has to go down. And then the next one, I'm just thinking it's one up, but if I wanted to check it, I could. I see that that's one up meaning one step up, and this is back to the first note, same as this one. Now that can be very helpful. If you see that this note and that note are the same note, make sure they're the same note here, that you don't kind of get lost somewhere in the translation. Now, I find students have a little more trouble going from bass to treble because it's backwards to what they're usually thinking. If you're counting up, then you have to put it over here and like what. So especially here, the grand staff is very, very helpful. So this is an E. Okay, we want to transpose it up one octave into the treble clef. Remember, it's not up here. It's not the one that looks close to that E. Okay, so we've got an E, F, G, A, B, middle C, D, E. There it is. Okay, it's right here. Again, I color it in, and the stem is going to be different. I have students who will write just circles and then put stems and coloring in after. If it works for you, good, but I find that sometimes they forget to color things in. But anyway, so you can kind of go, okay, E, F, G, A, B, middle C, D, E, and kind of do it up here like that would make it the first line of this. But I think it's much easier to do it on a grand staff. Again, print one out, write one for yourself. They're not hard to make. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make a space, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Space, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As long as you understand, then you got your middle C in here. It'll be easy to do it. Don't try not to do it in your head. Most people, when they do it in their head, they make mistakes. Okay, so let's try a couple of these. A couple of examples here. We've got our nice grand staff up here. Now, this note is a D. What's really important is to remember this is middle C right here. This is middle C. Doesn't look like middle C if you're a treble clef instrumentalist, for example, but it's a middle C. This line, I mean. The line is middle C. So this D is above middle C. So sometimes you can use logic. Oh, that's the D above middle C. It must be this one. Or you go here. So this is D, which would be right there. E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Okay, so that's that. I mean, when I said this is this D, it is. So then when you go up an octave, it's going to be here. All right, so that D right there is that D. Go up the octave. That might not have been too clear. So let's try that again. Here's a D. That would be here. So that's above middle C. So your next D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. It would be up here. But sometimes it's helpful if you know that this is middle C. Okay, that's that D. That D right there is here. Then I can do it on the staff. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can do it. If it's above these, when it's a C or a D, like right there, I find that it's fairly easy to think about it. Put that note there and think up an octave. If it's another note like this one right here, it's easier to go with your grand staff. But whatever works for you, right? So that's a D. Again, we erase our little key thing there. Stem down. That's a G. Okay, so again, you can go G, A, B, C, D, to G, or you can say, well, if that's a D, then the G will be here. Stem up now. Problem with that is if you don't have the first right note, the right first note, then you're not going to get the second note correct, right? So you've got to make sure that you've got the beginning correct. So be really careful about that. Use a grand staff. Okay, we've got one more example here. Okay, just I'm going to let you think about it for a second. There's an A. Where would that A be on the bass clef? If you're trying to think, whatever it's going to be, I'm going to count down, I'm going to use the grand staff, whatever, it's going to be right here. I hope that's what you figured. Okay, it's going to be that A right there. and that D will be down here. Okay? Now, if we did it on here, here's an A. Again, go down. A, G, F, E, D, middle C, B, A. Okay? I hope this was helpful.